Well, a lot of people want to know, is hypnosis covered by insurance? Is hypnotherapy covered by insurance? And to understand the answer to this, we actually have to take a step back and understand a little bit of the lay of the land of this mental health tool that is hypnosis. So it's fascinating because nowadays, to be a hypnotist, it's a largely unregulated field. Hypnotists, if they have just hypnotists, are not actually allowed to do therapy, but it's not that difficult to become a hypnotist. You could take a course that lasts for a couple of weeks, and you are typically allowed to at least call yourself a hypnotist. Sometimes the word hypnotherapist is regulated, but hypnotist is not. So the average person that you look up in your city who is a hypnotist has trained specifically in the art of hypnosis and cannot do therapy. And therefore, it's oftentimes categorized as an alternative therapy and typically is not covered by insurance or by benefits. But the interesting thing is that hypnosis at its root, back in the day, has its roots in conventional therapy training. Almost every therapist, when they're learning about the history of therapy as a whole, but the grandparents of modern therapy, Freud, and who's the behavioralist again? What's his name? Pavlov. You learn about Pavlov. There's these grandfathers. One of the main figures you learn about is actually Milton Erickson. And Milton Erickson was a genius with hypnosis, where he could, through having conversations with people, and with a very contrarian and sort of roundabout way, create rapid change in people in a way that was quite astounding, in a way that in some ways was hard to teach because it was such an intuitive skill that he had. But in the 60s and 70s, it really put things on the map. You can still find old school therapists, psychotherapists, especially in the medical field, dentists, doctors, especially psychiatrists who've trained in hypnotherapy. And so if we go back to the roots, we see that actually hypnosis is founded and is part of the bedrock of therapy that we know of today. Things have progressed. There's things that are much more popular like CBT and stuff like that. But hypnosis has its place in therapy and many times can be extremely powerful. And so really the distinction is then, who is the practitioner who is working with you? A. And B, what is the specific techniques that they are doing? Because a lot of times hypnosis, being in a state of trance, that's just the container. That's the state of your mind. What happens in that place can vary a lot. And a lot of hypnotists, for example, are trained to be very behavioral, to really focus on the future and to create change through visualization. And they take a very proactive approach, and you as a client are quite passive and have a script read to you. Meanwhile, there are other forms of hypnosis, the kind that we do at our clinic, that is actually a lot more focused on you, the client, going through your own process and your own journey. And that way, it's actually far more similar to therapy. You can think of it as doing therapy while in the state of trance. In the way that we do it, you can actually use your benefits to see a therapist, but then to do this really unique and powerful form of therapy that is actually really uncommon. It's rarely taught today. Things are much more behavioral and practical and cognitive. But actually, if you try hypnosis, many people find that a single session that can create this rapid change that they have been struggling with for years. Because our philosophy is that you have to dive deeper into your body and into your emotional and subconscious world to create the change that you want to create. And hypnosis is really helpful for that. And this is also worthy of almost making the distinction between hypnosis and hypnotherapy. Hypnosis oftentimes can stand on its own, and it's oftentimes regulated once we're in the context of mental health. That is something that in the United States and in Canada is oftentimes discouraged. So that is something to keep in mind when you're looking for a hypnotist versus hypnotherapist. Sometimes that distinction is made, where if somebody is not a licensed therapist, they might stick to the word hypnosis, but some people might not be so scrupulous about which term they use because they are to some degree interchangeable. But I like to think of it as hypnotherapy is the therapeutic experience of hypnosis. Hypnosis can stand on its own and it can be something that is off to the side. But hypnotherapy, my dream is just like you have cognitive behavioral therapy, just as you have narrative therapy, that you have hypnotherapy. And that's therapy that is done with hypnosis as the key factor. So to answer the original question, can hypnosis be covered with benefits? Yes. With our clinicians, you can actually come to us, work with the therapist. You're doing therapy. You're doing hypnosis that is grounded in Ericksonian hypnosis. And you can then get reimbursed by your benefits, by your insurance if you have it, and actually makes the process simultaneously more affordable and more effective.